Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Michael Costa Show. Today, I'll talk to you about a bit of everything. I have some stuff. Basically, the theme of this video will be that we are not going back to normal. Normal life as we know it does no longer exists. I've come to that conclusion by listening to politicians and how they've changed the goalposts for the last year. What became 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into a year. What became 28 days to kill the second wave is now going into 6 months. So we see that these people don't keep their word, and there's what they say is absolutely has nothing based in reality. So like I've said since the beginning of this pandemic, that they were going to use this pandemic for their political advantages, for their political agendas. They'll take advantage of this pandemic to advance their political agendas. Like I said from the beginning, they were going to use this pandemic for a reason, maybe to continue lockdowns to lower carbon emissions and fix what they call inequity, which is equality of results, which that is never going to be fixed. So today I'm going to show you how some people say we're going back to normal in September. Some experts say in 24, 25. Some politicians say that we shouldn't go back to normal. And then I'll end this video with a warning that Europe is giving on the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and how what they're saying in Europe compared to what they're saying here, what public health officials are saying here in Canada. So let's start off. Here in the La Presse, they say no return to normal before September, according to some experts, right? Well, here you have Dr. Carl Weiss of the Association of Microbiologists of Quebec saying that a return to normal life, maybe in 2024, 2025. So in 3 or 4 years, you might return to normal. So all of you that had planned for baptisms, for weddings, planned on getting married, planned on having vacations, going to travel, see the world, forget about that. It's just not going to happen. So even Biden yesterday in his primetime national address said that, basically talking like a grandfather's talking to his kids, pleading with them to listen to him, that maybe if they listen to him, they might be able to have a few people over for July 4th, Independence Day. So we see how they're not looking to push to get back to normal. See, I'm even going to talk to you about inflation, how inflation is skyrocketing because governments are printing money and borrowing money, thus printing even more of it to alleviate the suffering of some people, some business owners, some people that lost their jobs. But the consequences of this printing money is that the money you do have will have much less purchasing power. But I'll get to that. So basically, there's another expert, Carl Weiss, like I just told you, of the Association of Microbiologists of Quebec, saying a return to normal life maybe in 2024, 2025. They said it's because the vaccines prevent from you having severe symptoms from COVID-19, but doesn't prevent you from being contagious. Or they're using that excuse, or they're using the variant excuse, where all across the world, in most new cases, over half of them coming from the variants, but the cases are still dropping. So they're starting to lose that narrative. So now they're moving on to the new narrative. But that one's almost dead because, like I'm going to show you now, according to Pfizer, now keep in mind this is according to Pfizer, they did a real-time study with real-time patients that took the vaccine in Israel, because Israel has vaccinated almost over 90% of their population. And one of the results they got, it says right here, data suggests Pfizer biotech vaccine prevents asymptomatic SARS-CoV-2 infection. Basically, the results they got from real people that got vaccinated is that in most of the cases, the data suggests that you are not contagious once you receive the Pfizer biotech vaccine. Right? But even at that, I'll show you here a woman from the World Health Organization and what she says about asymptomatic contagion.
What proportion of asymptomatic individuals actually transmit? So the way that we look at that is we look at these individuals need to be followed carefully over the course of when they're detected and looking at secondary transmission. We have a number of reports from countries who are doing very detailed contact tracing. They're following asymptomatic cases, they're following contacts, and they're not finding secondary transmission onward. It's very rare. And much of that is not published in the literature. From the papers that are published, there's one that came out from Singapore, looking at a long-term care facility. There are some household transmission studies where you follow individuals over time and you look at the proportion of those that transmit onwards. We are constantly looking at this data, and we're trying to get more information from countries to truly answer this question. It still appears to be rare that an asymptomatic individual actually transmits onward. What we really want to be focused on is following the symptomatic cases. If we followed all of the symptomatic cases, because we know that this is a respiratory pathogen, it passes from an individual through infectious droplets. If we actually followed all of the symptomatic cases, isolated those cases, followed the contacts and quarantined those contacts, we would drastically reduce. I would love to be able to give a proportion of how much transmission we would actually stop, but it would be a drastic reduction in transmission. If we could focus on that, I think we would do very, very well in terms of suppressing transmission. But from the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual.
Well, there you have it, folks. From the mouth of the World Health Organization, that's saying that transmission from asymptomatic people, there is no proof of such transmission. The data does not suggest that asymptomatic patients, COVID patients, are transmitting the disease. Not me saying it, the World Health Organization saying it. So now you see, I've showed you how here in Quebec, some experts are saying we're going back to normal in September. Others are saying not before 2024 or even 2025. Yet we see from Pfizer's study on actual real-time vaccine patients that they are not contagious, that the data suggests they are not contagious. Then we have it straight from the mouth of the World Health Organization saying that asymptomatic people, the data does not show that they transmit the disease in high numbers. And now I'll show you how they're transitioning into programming you to accept further lockdowns for other reasons than the pandemic. Like in Forbes magazine. Report, world needs equivalent of pandemic lockdown every 2 years to meet Paris carbon emission goals. The dramatic drop in global carbon emissions seen during the early days of the pandemic and global shutdowns would need to be matched every 2 years for the rest of the decade in order to meet the goals outlined in the Paris Climate Agreement, according to a new study. Though the authors don't recommend that the world rely on lockdowns to help battle climate change. So if the authors of the study do not recommend that the world rely on lockdowns, why are we publishing an article, an op-ed? Well, yes, it's an op-ed in Forbes magazine telling that the world needs these types of lockdowns every 2 years to hit targets of the carbon emissions, of the global carbon emissions. That's because they're trying to slowly get you to. They're trying to normalize lockdowns, basically, is what they're trying to do. But yet they'll tell you, oh, the authors didn't recommend that the world rely on lockdowns. But that's just to open the door for you to see that that's what we need to reach those goals. So it's like the story of the frog in the boiling pot. You don't put the frog in the water as it's already boiling. You put it in normal temperature water and you lift the heat up a bit, slowly, bit by bit. So when the frog notices that the water is hot and that he has to get out of there, it's too late. Well, that's basically what they're doing here. Right? They're giving you these balloons. They're throwing you these balloons so you see the idea. It comes in your mind. Oh, okay. So what we need to reach those targets of global carbon emissions would be lockdowns like we're having now. Oh, okay. But maybe the authors don't recommend that, so maybe we're not going there. And then next would be maybe that's where we should be going. But I've been showing you for over a year that that's where they're going. You didn't want to listen, but maybe it's time you start listening. Now let me show you what the governor of California said about lockdowns. Governor Newsom to Californians, let's face it, we're never getting back to normal. That's a great message to send to a restive electorate after a year of fumbling the response to COVID-19. Gavin Newsom tried to get cute in his State of the State speech from an empty Dodger Stadium, pledging to deliver a new and improved normal. But it fell as flat as, well, Newsom's entire gubernatorial career, maybe his career as governor. Small wonder Californians want to push him out of office before the end of his term via an upcoming recall. California Governor Gavin Newsom will say during the State of the State address that the pandemic will end soon. But when it does, Newsom will say that we're not going back to normal because normal accepts inequity. That's according to excerpts from Newsom's speech that the governor's office released Tuesday. So 3 days ago. The Democratic governor is scheduled to deliver the address at Dodger Stadium as he faces a likely recall election later this year, fueled by widespread anger over his handling of the pandemic. The governor further explained his comment that normal accept inequity by elaborating that inequity was the reason Latinos were dying from COVID at a higher rate over any other racial or ethnic group in the state, why the poor wages of essentially workers are not enough to live on, and why the state has seen mothers leave the workforce in dramatic numbers. So already he's pushing that we cannot open up everything because going back to normal meaning would be going back to inequity. So like Obama's old chief of staff and former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, said, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So now they're using this crisis to further political agendas. In this case, inequity, which is equality of outcome instead of equality of opportunity for everybody, which is what I believe in. And he says over here that Latinos are the most hit. You know why? Because of your lockdown measures that you put in effect that live in more poor situations, whether they be Hispanic, white. It's poor people that are affected more by your lockdown measures, and thus by the pandemic itself. So it's not that the virus affects has a prejudice itself. That would be just plain stupid. It's the measures that cause this and that put these people in bigger danger towards the virus. Plain and simple. And now let me show you the dangers, not of the lockdowns, because I've shown you this many times in the past few weeks, but of the economic policy measures that most governments, especially more progressive governments, are enacting in printing a lot of money, throwing money away at problems, thinking that is going to resolve, that money resolves all problems, is the solution to all problems. So here in CNBC, Inflation may have been warming up in February, but it could be hot by May. The Consumer Price Index is expected to show a moderate gain in inflation of 0.4% in February, or 0.1 when excluding food and energy. Yeah, which is basically the two biggest expenses of the population, which is groceries and putting gas in your car. The market is closely watching the number as debate swirls around whether a surge in the economy boosted by fiscal stimulus will lead to high inflation. The Federal Reserve and many Wall Street economists expect inflation to jump, but just temporarily due to base effects of last year's low levels of inflation when the economy was shut down. Inflation is just warming up, but by late spring, it could get downright hot, even if temporarily. So basically, it's the fact that these people keep on borrowing money. So they borrow money, they need to print more money. So they print more money. What happens when you, it's the laws of supply and demand, which I know many young people don't understand because they took away economics classes from high schools. But the more of something you put out in circulation, so that means you're diminishing the demand. So that means it goes down and inflation goes up. But your money, the value of the money goes down. So everything, the cost of everything you need to buy will go up. And in this case, the two biggest scares in inflation are food and energy. So, like, for example, let's take example of Quebec Solidaire, right? They put out this big plan of to reignite the economy when this pandemic is over, and most of their program is basically just throwing money at things, recurrent expenses that will come back every year. Not specific expenses that are one-time deals to try to boost. No, it's recurrent. Hiring these many people, hiring this, buying that, giving money to these people. When you give money to some people, you take away money from other people. That's just plain economics. Right? So what will happen when they keep on, basically because we have no money, so we will borrow all this money if they come into power. And then what will happen? Value of money will go down and the prices of everything will go up. So you want a steak, you want to buy a steak, it's going to cost you $30. You want to buy eggs, they're going to cost you $10 a dozen. Those are the types of things you will see with inflation. In Bloomberg Wealth, food prices are soaring faster than inflation and incomes. And that's a problem. When the prices of food are growing faster than generalized inflation and your income, we have a big problem. As the COVID-19 pandemic wreaks havoc on economic growth, concerns about hunger and malnutrition are rising around the world. Global food prices are going up, and the timing couldn't be worse. In Indonesia, tofu is 30% more expensive than it was in December. In Brazil, the price of local mainstay turtle beans is up 54% compared to last January. In Russia, consumers are paying 61% more for sugar than a year ago. Emerging markets are fleeing the pain of a blistering surge in raw material costs, as commodities from oil to copper and grains are driven higher by expectations for a roaring 20s, post-pandemic economic recovery, as well as ultra-loose monetary policies. Consumers in the US, Canada, and Europe won't be immune either, as companies, already under pressure from pandemic-related disruptions and rising transport and packaging costs, run out of ways to absorb the surge. So here, what I just explained to you, pure in Bloomberg, saying that these monetary policies and that government borrowing and printing money at a record pace is totally destroying your purchasing power. Now think for yourself, if your salaries or income won't rise, but food prices and inflation will skyrocket, what will be left in your pockets? Not much. Not much will be left in your pockets for for you to purchase things for your family, or maybe that you want to go on a reward your kids for a hard year they had. Maybe try to go on a little vacation with your kids. Well, that'll be impossible because the prices of everything have gone up, nowhere close to the rise of incomes and salaries. So those are the dangers of government policies throwing money always at as a solution to problems. That is not the case, and never was, and never will be, because there's nothing free in life. You borrow something, you have to pay interest, and eventually you're gonna have to pay back. And we're already paying sky high interest rates. Well, not interest rates, interest payments to God knows who that we owe this debt to. And with the fact that these politicians and some so-called obeying narrative experts that are pushing for endless lockdowns, continuous lockdowns. So this is only going to get worse. Now I'll finish the video with some words about the AstraZeneca vaccine. Published in a German newspaper or website, several European countries halt use of AstraZeneca vaccine. Denmark, Iceland, and Norway have stopped administering the shot, while Italy has banned the use of a batch of AstraZeneca doses as a precaution after an unconfirmed number of people developed blood clots. So Denmark, Iceland, and Norway have stopped giving the vaccine to its population, and Italy has banned the use of a batch. But they're doing further studies because there's a precaution of an unconfirmed number of people developing blood clots following having taken the vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine. Here, doctors and scientists challenge European Medicines Agency on COVID-19 vaccine danger. This week, a group of scientists and doctors have issued an open letter calling on the European Medicines Agency to answer urgent safety questions regarding COVID-19 vaccines or withdraw the vaccine's authorization. The letter describes serious potential consequences of COVID-19 vaccine technology, warning of possible autoimmune reactions, blood clotting abnormalities, stroke, and internal bleeding, including in the brain, spinal cord, and heart. The authors request evidence that each medical danger outlined was excluded in preclinical animal models with all three vaccines prior to their approval for use in humans by the EMA. The letter is addressed to Emer Cook, Executive Director of the EMA, and was sent on Monday, March 1st, 2021. The letter was copied to the President of the Council of Europe and the President of the European Commission. So these are experts, scientists in Europe sounding the alarm on the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now let's compare those to Canada's public health officials. No sign of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine causes blood clots, Canadian health authorities, according to Canadian health authorities. Canadian health authorities are keeping a watchful eye on European investigations of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine after reports of blood clots following inoculations, but say there is no evidence they were caused by the vaccine. At least 9 European countries hit pause on their use of AstraZeneca doses, some entirely and others only on specific batches, pending further investigation of blood clots, though none suggested there is a link between the clots and getting the vaccine. Canada's first 500,000 doses of AstraZeneca are being put to use just this week. So, folks, I am not a doctor, so I'm not going to give you medical opinion on whether you should take the vaccine or not. I'm just letting you know that there are dangers that scientists and doctors are pointing out in Europe, that there are dangers that this this vaccine may cause blood clots and other cardiovascular related diseases, problems, if you will. I'm just informing you of the information that's out there about this vaccine. But it's up to you to make that decision because it's your body, your choice, right? So guys, that was my video for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Michael Costa Show. I hope to see you soon. Peace out.